Well, hello, Ridgeview family and members of the community. I know that many of you have been invited into this as we deal with the financial impact of this crisis, this pandemic. Ridge-Viewpoint was originally, of course, something that we looked at to be a source of knowledge and in fact, a resource for you as we bring in folks from around the community and then within the church family who have just expertise in a particular area and want to share their expertise with us in a way that serves us well and serves the kingdom well. And so John and I were talking a few weeks ago and, about a week ago, a little more, about what impact this pandemic was having on the church, the different kinds of impact, and one that continued to really stick out to us and continues to rear its head is the financial impact that this crisis, this pandemic has caused. And so we started making some calls, and I knew back from my time, one of the first churches that I really loved and was a part of very deeply was Central Baptist Church in Johnson City, Tennessee. And Jennifer and I spent many of our years there as a young married couple, and they nurtured us very well and loved us very well. And the two gentlemen that are with us this morning, both at times mentored us as a young couple, and particularly me. And so I'm very appreciative of and for them for many things besides their willingness to share their expertise with us. So let's introduce them. I just want you to be able to get to know them very briefly. First, we have with us Bill Stover. Mr. Bill met with Jennifer and I several times in the course of our young marriage just to give us good, solid advice on how to kind of get our marriage off on the right foot financially. And was a huge blessing to us. And I'm also going to let each of these gentlemen just give you a brief kind of synopsis of where they're coming from in the conversation. So, Mr. Bill, take it away.
Yeah, I was worked for retired now, but worked with Principal Financial and was an investment advisor with them, basically on my own. They were basically the back office situation, but was involved in doing a lot of financial planning and just understanding people's situations, their objectives, and dealing with that before we went into a lot of investments. But most of my dealing was with investments and 401ks and things like that. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. We also have Mr. Jeff Keller with us. And Jeff, why don't you introduce yourself, brother?
Thank you, Patrick. My background, I guess you could say, really does make me maybe a retirement expert, in part because I'm already retired. I worked for the Social Security Administration where I dealt with retirement. State was there for 25 years and at a fairly early age had an opportunity to take a retirement. Wasn't really sure what I was going to do after that, but was blessed to end up in another job. I am working again now as a retirement planning specialist and financial planner for one of the major financial firms. And it's been a blessing to get to carry what I learned in my experience in my first job with the Social Security Administration and apply a lot of that into what I do now. So glad to be here today.
That's great. Well, gentlemen, we thank you both. And I figure we just start off with a word of prayer, and then we'll just jump straight into some of these questions. So folks, stay tuned and join us in prayer. And we're going to get to these questions here in just a moment. Let's go to the Lord in prayer. Well, Lord, as we have so often done throughout our lives in the midst of this tragedy and this pandemic and the spread of this virus, we have leaned on your sovereignty. We've leaned on the comfort that is provided by the knowledge that this hasn't taken you by surprise, that you do not sit upon your throne and scratch your head about the nature of this virus or its impact. Lord, you're intimately familiar with it. You're more familiar with it than anything we can possibly imagine. And so we know, Lord, that you have searched out and you have known completely and perfectly the impacts that this virus is having in the lives of all people, and specifically your people. So, Lord, help us to serve your people well as we have this conversation. Lord, take our words and make them both understandable and applicable to the lives of your people who, Lord, serve you by giving of themselves, by giving of their financial resources to bring into the Lord's storehouse. So, Lord, grant your Spirit, even though I'm separated from Mr. Bill and separated from Jeff by distance. Lord, we thank you for the technology and for Josh's expertise to make this work and to bring us together this morning to have this conversation. And Lord, we're united by your Spirit as well, and that we worship one God, one Father, one Son, one Spirit. And we ask that you would grant us your Spirit now and bless our conversation together in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, gentlemen, let's jump into some of these questions. And the first one applies to Social Security. And the question is worded thusly: what do you think Social Security will look like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road?
Okay, Patrick, I guess we're going to start with an easy question then.
Let's start. I'm going to lob you a softball, guys. I'm going to lob you a softball. We'll start there.
Well, to give just a little background, Social Security has been around since 1935, created during the Great Depression, ironically at a time that unemployment levels were very similar to what they are today. Both before the pandemic started and certainly afterward, we've seen a lot of negative media reports, concerns about the future of Social Security. Is it going to be there when it's time for me to draw a check, things of that sort. And I don't want to say that those are fake news at all, because there are concerns, but let's take just a moment to consider what the actuality of that is. Just last week, a report came out talking about the Social Security trust funds. And just to kind of make sure everybody understands what that means, Social Security is actually funded with current taxes. I'm working and paying taxes that hopefully are paying Bill's Social Security check, probably. You're welcome, Bill.
Yes, thank you.
When there's a shortfall, however, if there's not enough taxes coming in, which because of the aging of our population and the lower birth rate is the case now, there are reserves called trust funds that Social Security dips into to keep paying the benefits. So a lot of the media reports have talked about that these trust funds are depleting. And in fact, with the increased unemployment and the increased number of people who are starting to file for Social Security during this time, they're now anticipating those trust funds could run out in 2033. Well, that sounds very scary, and a lot of times the media portrays it as we wouldn't get any more Social Security checks after 2033, and gosh, how awful would that be? Well, first of all, even in a worst-case scenario, that's not the case. If the trust funds completely depleted, Social Security Administration would still be able to pay out almost 80% of monthly checks. So in a worst-case scenario, if nothing happened to fix it, a $1,000 check would become $800 at that time, and that could actually extend in perpetuity. There wouldn't be a need for further cuts. But the question is that going to happen? Because that's still a pretty big hit. And the answer is certainly we don't know, but I would strongly doubt it, and I'll give you just a little reasons why. Social Security has become incredibly ingrained in our nation and our culture over these last 85 years or so. The impact of changes to it are just more than we would be able to withstand. If you look at, though it wasn't the intent, almost 2/3 of people who receive Social Security benefits, that's the vast majority of their income. For a third of our seniors over 65, it's over 90% of their income. So what that means is our congressman, our president, and our nation, we've got a lot of reasons to fix this. to make sure that we don't see those 20% cuts. And I would also say that there's a lot of ideas out there to fix it. If you go to Social Security's website and you're having trouble sleeping, there's a list of about 200 different proposals to be able to fix it. And those are a lot of different things and some scary things. But to be honest, the fix really wouldn't be that bad. I'll give you an example just real quickly of one fix. We could increase the tax rate, and none of us like to talk about increasing taxes, but increasing the payroll tax on Social Security by 1%.
We just lost 50% of our users. 50% just logged
I
off.
completely understand. I'm with it. But so every $1,000 you're earning, you give up $10. And I think most of us are probably in a position to be willing to do that to make sure that our parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and later on ourselves are certainly able to continue drawing. The other part that we would probably need to do is increase the retirement age. And that certainly sounds a little frightening to people, but think back when Social Security was started in 1935, retirement age was 65. For someone born today, it's 67. So compare the life expectancy. Somebody born in 1870 could draw Social Security at 65, and an infant born today would be 67. That needs to change. The important thing about most all of these, if you were to bump full retirement age out a couple of years for people that are 50 and less now, if you were to do the little 1% increase in the taxes and also tweak benefits for people that have incomes over 100,000, and when I say tweak, maybe take a cut of $100 on a $2,000 check, those three things in and of themselves would fix it, would keep the trust funds going in perpetuity. And I think is something that very likely will occur simply because of how critical Social Security is now to taking care of our seniors over 65.
And so in a sense, I'm kind of getting the same kind of line of thinking that we heard with banks a few years ago about being too big to fail, that this program is essentially, it has way too many, the impacts are so far reaching, we can't allow it to fail. Is that
that's an excellent comparison. You know, we would look, if Social Security didn't exist, we'd have massive increases in food stamps, government housing, things that would be far more expensive than what we'd be paying out in small amounts to fix it.
Okay. Excellent.
And Patrick,
Bill, anything you want to jump in and add? Yes, sir.
Yeah, just that, it's also the design, and this is obviously issues we're going to discuss here in just a minute. Social Security, even though, people, like Jeff says, 90%, 80%, that's all their income. That's not really the design of it, and it's supposed to be supplemental to some savings. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. And people have to realize that that's not what you're supposed to live on the rest of your life. So we'll talk about some of those.
Absolutely. Certainly some connections coming up. Maybe one of them right now. We got a question, gentlemen, from a teacher, and I actually saw this question a couple of times in different forms, both from a teacher, from a school nurse. So a bunch of folks that are employed by the state in different capacities. But this question came from a teacher specifically. As an employee of the state, should I be researching anything outside of, I believe, the retirement system, the TCRS, that the state supplies for the teachers and the state employees? Should they be researching something outside of that would be supplementary to that program?
In a short answer, absolutely. Our teachers are very blessed with the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System to have what is a very rare thing anymore, and I know Bill will agree. Teachers under Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System still will receive at their retirement a pension, an actual old-fashioned monthly check that arrives from their former employer. And so oftentimes in talking to teachers and other state employees, they will ask this question, I'll have my Social Security benefit, I'll have my pension. Is there a need for me to really worry necessarily about anything else? And I think my answer to that would be an absolute yes, because while those things are going to be a real blessing and likely take care of most of your standard monthly expenses, you're going to have challenges that you face in life that are a little bit larger. It could be something as simple as an HVAC replacement at your home, a roof on your home, a new car, perhaps some unexpected medical expenses. So the chance to take a look at things outside of TCRS itself, and I would include when saying outside, there's a 401k option for them as well, though there's not much in the way of matching. Certainly, we'd want to encourage teachers to take a look at those things to try to build up some savings, both for needs that they would have now.
The 401k is elective?
It is.
It's not packaged within that. Okay.
Right. It's a good question. But certainly would encourage them to try to build up some savings and things, vehicles outside, and just for some of those top expenses. And Bill, would you maybe comment on some of the options they would have to do that?
Yeah, they could do a lot of with the 401ks. In fact, my wife was a teacher and a principal for 29 years, so she was involved in this. So she's got the Social Security,
great one,
situation. She's got the TCRS, but then she also was encouraged by a very smart person. We won't name who it was to involve that 401k as well, and. And there's a lot of things you can do with mutual funds and different companies provide that service to whether it be Johnson City, Washington County, Hawkins County, whoever. And that is an additional layer. And I might add, there's actually a fourth leg to the stool would be just general savings outside of investments, which Jeff was referring to as far as taking care of a transmission in your car or something like that you'd have where like in the 401k, there's obviously some rules, regulations about not taking some monies out under penalties and so forth. So, and since Social Security occurred till later on, 7 and so forth. So you need to have some other layers. So 4 different legs are a whole lot better than 2. So.
Oh, that's good. The next question is somewhat connected, but I think it's just more kind of searching for a clarification. It's again from a teacher, and they ask, if I continue teaching, it shows or they figured that they're about 15 years from full retirement. However, to them, it seems they remain around 30 years away from access to Social Security. And they just ask, what accounts for the disparity between those two year figures?
Well, I'll give you 2 reasons. One is just simple legislative policy difference between the state and federal politicians. The other is how long you've been a teacher, because I'm going to guess from the question that this teacher began prior to July 1st, 2014. So our teachers that have been on board and had started back before then, for them to receive their full retirement benefits from the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System, they had to either have 30 years of service or be age 60. So if you were someone who started straight out of college at 21, at 51 years old, you could have your 30 years of service and be eligible for a full benefit. I mentioned it depends on when you start, because the state recognized that's a fairly good disparity and one that can, to be honest, be a little expensive to them from the tax side. So they actually changed the retirement plan for teachers and other state employees beginning July 2014. Now, instead of 30 years of service or age 60, you have to be either age 65 or have what they call the rule of 90. Meaning your years of service and your age have to total to 90. So our older teachers that have been teaching for a while, they may hit that 30 years at 51, 52 and be able to start their benefits. Someone starting now, if they were to start at age 25, or excuse me, at age 21, when they hit 30 years, they'd be 51 years old. They would only have 81 credits. So they would have to work another 4.5 to 5 years to be able to draw their benefits, which is narrowing the gap. The other part of that is, a lot of people say there's a 15-year difference because they think of Social Security for somebody born after 60 having a full retirement age of 67. Although that's true, you still actually can access the benefits at age 62. So that does narrow the gap somewhat. And the last thing I'd comment a little bit on is Tennessee Consolidated Retirement offers a wealth of options to state employees or teachers who are retiring. One of those is something they call leveling integration. And to put that into English, it allows that teacher that's retiring at 51 to have a higher pension from age 51 to age 62, accounting for the fact that their Social Security benefits aren't in existence at that point in time. The trade-off for them, when the Social Security benefits are eligible to be drawn at age 62, that pension goes down. So it may very well be that somebody who's eligible for a pension of a couple $1,000s a month, they may actually get one that's $3,000 a month for those first 10 or 11 years, and then drop down to something more in the realm of $1,200 or so after Social Security benefits are able to start. So I think there are options in taking that higher pension early. That means you get a lower one later. So it's a trade-off, and you have to kind of factor in the other savings and things that you may have as to whether that's the best choice. You also, when you retire as a teacher, have to make some choices about whether you're leaving benefits to your spouse if you were to pass away, and at what level you can do that. And that can affect also how much you draw as well.
Okay.
Bill, anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing in particular, just like we talked about, the other two savings and some 401k, but just so everyone knows, in my opinion, and I think it's very factual, TCRS is very well funded, and they do a really a good job as far as providing for the teachers. And I think there are some other states that have some issues with their state benefits programs, but Tennessee is a very solid situation.
That's a great point, Bill.
I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
Great point. In looking at, there's 4 or 5 different companies that evaluate the status of state pensions, and though Tennessee's rankings vary, they are in the top 5 in every one of them as far as the security, being well funded, and I think our state retirees and teachers, as Bill said, should have a lot of confidence that those funds are going to be available to them.
It's a good thing too. I've just been absolutely, nobody deserves it more. I mean, I've been blown away as I've seen all that my kids' teachers have continued to do to reach out to them digitally and host Zoom rooms and get them educational content. And we have many teachers here at Ridgeview, and we want you to know we see the work that you put in, and we recognize and affirm the impact that you have on young people. And we want to love and support you also. If we can do anything in that endeavor, please let us know. But also just hear our gratitude for everything that you're doing for our kids, the kids in this community. Your impact is irreplaceable. Just a brief follow-up. That's very...
Patrick, the situation of today with this stay-at-home, teachers are really appreciated now.
Absolutely.
being around kids 24/7, that's been, I know with my daughter's situation, she's trying to farm them out, from time to time, and can't put them anywhere. So
you got to do what you got to do.
More and more appreciated. Yes.
Absolutely. I could never even express in words how much I appreciate the teacher in my home. And I do want to say, I would be remiss if I came home and Jennifer saw this and she said, you should have made a big deal about Miss Amy and what a huge impact that Miss Amy had on my wife. She taught at Principal Amy's school for quite a few years, and Miss Stover had a massive impact on her. So I wanted to make sure that I said that. But the follow-up question to it was just who is the best person for them to contact to walk through some of the particulars in the specifics of what you guys are talking about? Is there a representative at the school or at the state level, or would they talk with someone like yourselves just to kind of explore that kind of stuff? Who's the best person for the teachers and folks employed in education to just go and talk to about this?
That's a great question, Patrick. The state has for the internal type things, as far as to get estimates of what their pension would be and things of that sort. The state has a fantastic website called Retire Ready Tennessee. The teachers would have a login where they would be able to access, get estimates, determine how their pension is calculated, follow along on their 401k, see information about that, options that they have, things of that sort. For external, then certainly, Bill talked about the value of some external savings, and I don't think we can emphasize that enough. A local financial advisor, a bank, certainly there's a lot of resources there that would be available to kind of help them plug that piece of it in. And sometimes a financial planner such as Bill, who's unfortunately retired now, but could be a huge benefit in helping folks understand how that TCRS pension, the 401k, and what they may be saving outside can all fit together. Give them a good idea of should they be saving additional or are they saving enough. So I would certainly start with the state's own resources through the Retire Ready, and then as need be, might consider talking to someone outside as well.
Okay. Yeah. Bill, anything to add, sir?
Not really. This, I know that you can't really believe everything that's on the internet, but the internet does provide a lot of practical information and suggestions. And just to get a little education there, obviously us old guys used to read books, and now it's all out there. You ask a question and boom, it's there. And like I said, you have to, some of it you just have to wade through, but there's a lot of good information out there that you can add to that. Sure.
Yeah. But it's wise that you did offer like you said, many things out there are good, trustworthy things, but we live also in a time where there is a lot of phishing and scamming, and particularly of the elderly, and a lot of it happens digitally. So like you said, it's important to kind of check your sources and do a lot of research on where you're finding your information, because there are certainly just as many folks out there who want to do good and who want to present accurate information and who want to be a healthy resource. There are just as many probably out there that would love to take advantage of people. So that's wise advice.
Yeah, it's just to get some ideas, and then like Jeff was saying, talk to someone that's maybe an advisor and see what situations. But you can have some thoughts going into it where you're just not going in.
Absolutely.
Right.
Sure. Absolutely. Next question is worded this way. Are there any funds or fund sectors we should invest in while the economy is slow or once it picks up? So kind of on both sides of that. And I know that you both have been great about really being forthright about what you can do and how far you can go and how right or how ethical it is for you to go to certain points. So, of course, just give us either as specific or as vague advice as you need to give us.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to defer this one to Bill, but I'll make the one comment I always tell folks that I work with when they say, well, can you tell me what's going to be the best investment over the next 3 months, 6 months, a year? Well, the answer is if I knew that for sure, I wouldn't need clients. I would simply take my own money and become incredibly wealthy, incredibly fast.
Right.
That's good.
Certainly there are some general guidelines and things. I think Bill would probably be able to well speak to that.
That works well pastorally as well, too. I mean, people come to us and they think, tell me what do you think God's going to do in my life? And it's like, if I knew that, I wouldn't pray either. I wouldn't have to go search for any answers with God. I wouldn't have to study the Word. I'm trying to learn just like you are. So
the situation that you have is, to say pick a fund or individual stocks or things like that. Obviously, the first thing I would tell people that we're talking about people in this question. We're talking about people who actually have extra money. Because the first thing we talk to them, that I've talked to them about, I'm sure Jeff does, is they look at all their asset liabilities. And if they have more liabilities than assets, they are not talking about investing. So we get rid of debts and credit cards and car payments and things like that. But if you have that monies, or especially if you're in a situation where your employer is matching your 401k money, 80% or plus of managers and mutual funds do not beat the S&P 500. There's only a few that do that, and so if you ask me, okay, where should I do it for the next 10, 20 years or whatever, put it in a general large fund like an S&P 500, whether it be Vanguard or T. Rowe Price or Fidelity, or any of those that have that you have access to, American funds. All those people have generic funds like that. There's also a total market fund that covers small, mid-size, and large companies. So a general fund has typically beaten most money managers. Now, that being said, if you have money and you want to be a little more aggressive, and the thing that I've talked to people about is you buy something, if it's an individual stock. Obviously, people go to Walmart, and if they like Walmart and think that that's a great store, maybe they buy that. Maybe they buy whatever. But you typically invest in a kind of a general broad situation. To do individual stocks is very scary. You have a tendency to overreact, and whereas if you're putting in your money, and as far as investing, whether now or later, with the market, of course, it was down like 35%. It's now down probably 18% or 20%. When you go to the store, you much prefer buying something for 75 cents than rather buy it for $1. So it's on sale now. Can it get lower? Yes. Can it go higher? Yes. No one knows, but it's lower than it was. And so you dollar cost average, you put in every month. If you're the teacher, or even at your work, you're deducting every paycheck X amount. It's a good process, and you don't see it, you don't have it. It's going in there investing, and in 20 plus years, you have a nice little nest egg there.
Yeah. Connected to that, there's a question actually a little bit down the page that we might just be able to append to the back end there. Is the pandemic likely to affect retirement funds or retirement funding?
I think the ik answer to that is yes. I think most anybody that has a 401k account, investment accounts, things of that sort, has certainly seen a decline in the value of those accounts as a result of the economic downturn. You may have friends, however, who will say, my 401k hasn't dropped any at all because I have it all in cash, or I have it all in government treasuries. And while they may feel like that they're being very wise at this point in time, in the long run, that's probably not the best bet. To earn 1.5% per year every year for the next 25 years till you retire, you're not really going to even likely keep up with inflation over that period. So certainly the economic downturn is going to impact us. It's going to have impacted those funds. But I think, as Bill was getting ready to say, it's a time factor. If I'm age 45 and I'm many years away from needing those retirement funds to be able to live on, then to be honest, I really shouldn't have a lot of concern right now. It's probably best if I don't even look at that 401k balance, because with the time frame that I have, while there's no guarantees in the market, there's never been in the history of our economy any period of time that downturn did not recover. And when you've got a lengthy time frame to look at before you're accessing those funds, you can have a lot of confidence that that's going to come back. I think that leads into people need to kind of be aware of what their time frame is and look at making adjustments as they move forward. If I'm 35, my investments need to look a lot different than if I'm 60 or 65. As I begin to near that time that I may be accessing those funds, generally speaking, I'll want to be less aggressive. I will want to move some of my money from the equity or stock market into things like bonds or fixed income. A great tool that can help the investors that maybe don't feel a lot of comfort or experience with that. Most all 401k plans have what are called target date funds. And with those, they have a certain year in the future, like it might be a target 2040 fund. That would indicate that you're anticipating you might be retiring and accessing those funds around 2040. And there'll be a target 2025, 2030. And within those, the managers of those funds automatically adjust them to become less aggressive as you near that potential retirement date. So those can be kind of a useful tool for folks that are concerned about, the pandemic affecting their retirement funds. If they're not comfortable or don't have an advisor that can kind of help walk them through specific investing, usually within those 401ks and even outside of those top things are available that will kind of automatically make some of those adjustments for you. Bill?
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the target funds. Do that for you. The question was about, is this going to affect people? And obviously, short term, yes. Like Jeff was saying, midterm, not as much, and long term, no. The situation is as you need to start pulling out monies, like Jeff was saying, in a safer situation, so that you have a 3-year or 4-year cushion in case the market goes down for the remainder of your funds. But these target funds do a good job with that. And like Jeff was saying, you can do it, on your own or through on your 401k situation. There's almost every company offers target funds, and that's a good thing if you don't want to do this yourself. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I've just reading through the questions, I've taken two, and it seems like they're very closely connected. So I'll read both questions, and I think you'll see how they're symbiotic, and maybe we can tackle them both at the same time. The first question was worded, we've been told we should prepare for more pandemics in the future, that these are things that are likely to increase in frequency rather than decrease, though we pray against that. And what saving strategies should we use to prepare for pandemics like this one that happen in the future? And then I think a good one to couple with that is just the more general question, what good practical methods have you heard or advised others to just save more money? What strategies can they use to save more money? Just good practical methods to do that.
All right, Patrick. Well, the obvious first thing in preparing for pandemics in the future is never have less than 12 rolls of toilet paper at your house at any point in time.
The TV. Yes, sir.
When you get down to 12, go and buy additional. I'm not saying to hoard, but always have a minimum.
I thought I was going to hear that in
rolls.
the funds question. I thought for sure I was going to hear about a toilet paper fund or Charmin fund or something like that. There you go.
But certainly, I think what has probably been enlightening to many of us during this, a lot of us, we've been blessed with good jobs that pay well. We've been blessed with an economy that's been very stable, and a lot of folks haven't had much concern about the stability of their employment. But we have seen during this some real surprises, certainly significant layoffs in places like restaurants and retail that we expected. But many of our brothers and sisters in the medical community have suffered through layoffs during this period of time, which I think was largely unexpected. So I think it has been an eye opener, and it's always been the case, but it's maybe made us more aware that we need to have that emergency savings so we hear about and we know we should have it, and we never tend to actually put that money back, or we put it back and we pull it out for things. But that lump of cash, whether it's 3 months of expenses, 4 months, if you're blessed and able to do so, 6 months, can be such a comfort during this time to know that if you're unemployed and needing to file for unemployment, but sometimes there's a time lag there in different situations, that you've got that cash to be able to make sure that you're meeting your basic monthly expenses for a period of at least 3 to 4 months. And if you can't do that, then make sure it's 1 to 2 months. It's just a starting point. And I think, I know Bill's had a lot of experience in kind of giving people ideas about how to save, what they can do, and how they can come up with the money to be able to try to save these emergency funds. So, Bill?
Sure. Yeah, and part of this, it's we're talking about all of these things, and it's great, but the people obviously that have real issues that have not done this and they're really struggling now, and so those are the ones that we really need to pray for because they're really going through some situations and where the unemployment seems to be kind of really scary, and will I get my job back and that type of thing. So, but in the meantime, some of the things to think about for them to get prepared for when their job comes back, when things kind of get a little bit more normal, and those that are kind of in the middle, is that it's really simple. We have given up a lot of opportunities that we think we're probably entitled to. I'm entitled to go out and have Starbucks, for example. And, my talking to my wife, I'm thinking, I wonder if people realize that, golly, I really didn't need to go to Starbucks every day, or I really didn't need to go to the movies twice a week, or I really didn't need to, so we go back to this, and Patrick, I think I'm hoping that you and Jennifer took that away. The biggest thing I said to you was separating wants from needs.
Absolutely. We continue to recall that.
There's a difference. I want to watch HBO, Showtime, all that, but do I really need all that? Do I really need that brand new car? Or do I just want transportation? On and on. So there's a lot of things, and that's the first thing you have to do is separate that. Going back to, and I'm not hitting on Starbucks. In fact, if you bought Starbucks stock, you've been pretty wealthy right now. So, but in the meantime,
I've got a Starbucks mug right here that was given to us for Christmas.
There you go. But in the meantime, it costs about 16 cents now for a cup of coffee in your home. And if you have a Keurig, that's about 50 cents with the little K cups. Starbucks minimum. How much it is, Patrick? No idea.
Well, I just used this mug. It was a gift. It's not actual. I didn't go get the coffee at Starbucks because I differentiate my needs and my wants. I got good advice at some point about differentiating my needs and my wants. So I made my coffee at home.
Well, it's just
we use K cups. But a cup of coffee is just a regular brew is $2.50, and just a little plastic cup. I mean, and most folks get like a dressed up kind of macchiato, and those are delicious. So I don't fault them for that. But the cost is high.
The same thing. Even going to a fast food like McDonald's for breakfast. A dozen eggs costs you $1. It takes 2, 3, 4 minutes maybe to fry an egg in a pan. A loaf of bread's $1, $1.25, $2, and you got 40 slices. I mean, it's the eating out has become, like I said, we've done this entitlement. We deserve that. Well, I'd much rather have $50 in the bank for some issue that really comes up than $50 at a restaurant with that costs probably, if you made it yourself, $10. You can do all kinds of things. And I'm not just hitting on and some of the parts of the economy, if everyone was like me, we go down the tooth because we don't go out to eat that much and, so forth. But understand that you have to separate wants and needs. And it's just and some of this, our technology says we've got to have these things. And I try to do the value of, and the biggest thing, especially with kids, when I talk to my clients' kids, ask them, how much would that pair of, and this is going to date me, so how much is that pair of Air Jordans? I don't know who it is now, but anyway.
No, it's Jordan. So
it's
Jordan's still big. You on the right track.
Okay.
You on the right track.
Yeah. So, how much did they cost? And they said, oh, they were $100. I said, well, how much did you think you paid for them? And they said $100. I said, well, how many hours did you have to work to pay for those? And they give me this faraway look. And I said, did you take into account that you had to, you made $10 an hour and that's $100, 10 hours. So you should have worked all day for that. But you didn't figure in that you paid federal taxes, state taxes, everything. So it's probably about more like $135 for that $100 pair of shoes. And so that means you worked a day and a half for one pair of shoes. So, you think about what it actually costs you, and if you apply it to the number of hours you have to work to get that, I think you would think carefully about what you're spending. And so that's the whole process of what methods determine how much, separate your wants and needs, determine how much it's really costing you in hours of work. And then, then make that decision. It's very difficult because the pressure around from if you're a child in school, but an adult too, the pressure from around that they have this and they have that and they go here and they have a nice car. It's really tough. It's a really tough situation. But that's a decision.
And just to make sure, Well, just to make sure that people go ahead. Yes, sir. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, one other thing that I told you and Jennifer, that the way Amy and I did at first, and I mentioned this to Jeff in our pre-talk, is that, we decided that Amy, and for younger folks out there, Amy when we were going to have children, she wanted to make sure she stayed at home. And so I said, well, therefore, if we're going to do that, we only need to live on one salary. So for the several years that we were working together, we lived on one salary, because then when she did stay at home with the children, we were able to live on that one salary. Okay. And so that makes a big difference. I guess one other point is down the road when people are going to retire, they always say, well, I can live on, let's make up a number, I can live on $500 a month. And my comment to them was, okay, you're 4 years from retirement. Go ahead and start living on $500 a month. Try it out and see if you can do it. And what happens when they come back after a couple of months, they say, I really can't. So I said, okay, what's the number? And so that's the target, what Jeff was talking about. What's the target of how much you need to save and how much you need to have and so forth. So, Jeff, I'm sorry, I ran on a little bit. So.
Yeah, you're good.
I was just going to, just so that I know that folks, hear you and understand you clearly, particularly after the time that we spent with you, it's not that Bill is saying, you can never have a treat and go out to eat, or you can't have maybe like a particular family meal that you go and eat together. And so the benefit from that is worth the cost, and that you get to spend time together in a way that's unencumbered by having to worry about cleaning up. Or it's just always asking yourself, is there something else that we could do that would cost us a little bit less and that we could have similar things? Or are we balancing well our wants with our needs with regard to goals that we have for the future? So it's not necessarily a Spartan existence where you, sure, right, absolutely.
All goes back.
And then also, the other thing he told us often was, these things happen in degrees. So, for example, for your family, it may be because of what Bill's income was that they could live on that one income when, Miss Amy was still working and they could save all that money. But maybe for you and for your family, you need 80% of both incomes, but you could still put back 20% of one income. So it's not necessarily an all or nothing endeavor at all times. But you can work those solutions. I mean, a little thing that we decided to do early on, based off of our conversations with Bill, is anytime we use we try not to use the card as much as possible. When you pay cash for something, it's just a difference. You feel that money coming out of your pocket. It's easier to swipe your card. But when we do, particularly for smaller things, if we just don't have any cash with us, Jennifer in the checkbook will always put a whole figure for that. And then the difference in the checkbook at the end of the month goes into a savings account. So if I don't have any cash with me and I buy a cup of coffee at Weigel's, which I'm already hearing Bill in the back of my mind, go home and make that cup of coffee. But if I buy a cup of coffee at Weigel's and it's $1.50, Jennifer's going to write in the checkbook $2. And that's essentially taking all of the change, which if we paid cash, people aren't good with keeping up change anyway, and just siphons that into a savings account for just an extra kind of vehicle of putting stuff aside. So it can be little things like that. And sometimes it can be big things as well. So just wanted to package that to you. Anything you wanted to add, Jeff?
Yeah, Patrick, I was just going to give a little quick example from Jennifer and I.
Yes, sir.
The types of things that you could do. We had a particular piece of furniture that we really, really, really wanted to have. When I say we, that means she and I nodded and agreed to it.
Of course.
But it was something that was a little bit outside of our budget and things of that sort. So we just kind of made a decision that we were going to take some of what Bill was talking about for a specific period of time. We said, we're going to take 2 months and we're going to try to not eat out. We're going to try to, really, really kind of tighten the belt a little bit for a specific period of time. It wasn't necessarily that we were, as you were saying, we were never going to eat out or things again, but we were going to fund that purchase or fund that savings. Maybe sort of like a gym program where you say, I'm going to work out every day for 30 days or something. We did it for 2 solid months. We saved up enough money to buy the piece of furniture that we had. And Bill would like to hear that we then went back and had altered our lifestyle forever and stopped eating out and things of that sort. So we'll move on to the next question now.
Absolutely. So what we may do is, just because we're coming up on our, I don't think we really even had a specific marker of time of exactly how long we wanted this to go, but we're coming up at a great little hour figure that we don't have to cling to perfectly. But this next question, I remember, Jeff, you said in advance, this is kind of a bigger question. So we'll spend a little considerable amount of time with this, and then we may take the 3 or 4 questions that are at the end and just kind of go quick hitter, 2 or 3, 4 sentence responses. I know that some of these are probably beyond that, but if we can just give a few words to them, I know folks would appreciate it. And the one that was a little bit bigger, and that I think a lot of people are wondering about, is this, and it breaks down in parts. What government programs exist or have recently come into existence with the recent aid packages that we hear so much about on the news that I might have access to? And then it was asked in several different ways with regard to, perhaps we could just start with small businesses. What small business packages and resources are out there for small business leaders and owners?
Certainly, Patrick. I think everybody recognized at the beginning of this that small businesses were going to be massively impacted, particularly retail, restaurants, things of that sort. So Congress has passed several different programs intended to provide support to them. The most important one is probably the Paycheck Protection Program, or you'll see it referred to in the media as the PPP. You've seen that it came out, that it ran out of money, that it's been refunded, that some big businesses have been taking money from it and turning it back. But basically the idea behind this program is through the Small Business Administration, businesses with less than 500 people, there's some exceptions for hotels and restaurants that can be over that, but businesses with less than 500 people can apply for a loan through the Small Business Administration for 2.5 months of their payroll expense. The really important thing about this particular program is if they end up receiving and using that loan to provide payroll to their employees, to keep those employees in a job and not out of work, then they have an opportunity to have forgiveness of that full amount of that loan and never have to pay it back. It's a little interesting, too. Small businesses for this particular one has been defined to include 501c3s. So this can include churches, charitable organizations, things of that sort. And we know certainly that there's some potential financial impact to those folks as well. So my recommendation on the Paycheck Protection Plan, if you haven't explored it, but you have a small business can be one person. A self-employed person under this can actually, if they are their own business, can be one. You need to get in touch with your bank, go to the Small Business Administration website, but you need to do that very quickly. There's another $200 to $250 billion in funds that have been made available, but they will
just
run
heard that
out
on the radio on the way here.
Yeah,
yes, sir.
It's certainly going to be, but it can be a really critical thing for a smaller business to be able to get that. The idea, if you can pay your employees for a couple of months and the government's willing to forgive that loan and you not have to pay it back, that's fantastic. Through the Small Business Administration, there's also another one called the EIDL, or the Economic Injury Disruption Loan. That one is a loan, but has a $10,000 grant that you don't have to pay back. So even if the PPP funds ran out, the EIDL might also be a good opportunity. Really hard for a small business sometimes to get loans through traditional lending options. And this is one with an incredibly low interest rate, no payments for about 12 months. So it could be a critical mechanism if there's a funding need to try to keep your business open, that you could go through that. The last one I'll mention is through here locally, the local Chamber of Commerce and some local businessmen that really care about them. Andy Dietrich in particular has headed this up. They have a program that they're running through the chamber to provide grants to small businesses. They're taking in donations, and particularly maybe some of those that aren't able to qualify or don't get in for the PPP, they're hoping to be able to help them with some grants to keep them going. And you could contact the Chamber of Commerce for Washington County, and that's actually a broader, it's not just Washington County, it's broader than that. It's for the region. But they're kind of administering that.
Okay.
You know, on the individual side, on the individual,
yes, sir.
Jeff could help out with this a little bit more too. But obviously, you get the money that's coming, and it's going to be, you know, some people already have it now. Some people may get it later. But the $100 for the adults and the $500 for the children, that's coming. The unemployment. Jeff speak that besides regular unemployment, they get the additional monies. There's also not forgiveness, but there's also a postponement that's available, I believe, and if you work with your credit card company or utility company, things like that, remembering that still is going to have to be paid. It's not a forgiveness. So, but they push it back out a little bit further, and they, you know, maybe they may forgive some of the interest for a month or two, but that's something that individually you would work out. And Jeff, you maybe want, I don't know if you want to talk about that, the money.
And let me jump in.
Yeah.
As you pick back up on it, Jeff, let me just ask about the mortgage deferment, because I've actually heard this two different ways, and I've been very confused about it. The mortgage deferment, I believe it's for 3 months, or it may be 2 months. Is that something that they're going to have to pay back the first month that they resume payments in its entirety? Or is that something that mortgage lenders are required to kind of reposition to the back end of the loan?
That's a great question, Patrick. And that's where it actually varies by bank. A lot of mortgages may be insured through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, federally insured and backed mortgages. those have a deferment opportunity that can actually be up to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to contact the mortgage provider and work with them on that. And how long it's deferred is going to be dependent on your specific situation. But it's possible in those situations that you would be able to skip your mortgage payment for as much as 12 months. With those particular ones, those mortgage payments are tacked onto the back end. So if your mortgage was going to end at the end of 2023 and you deferred 12 months, it would run through the end of 2024. The others that are not Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, it's dependent on the individual bank. And that's Bank of America, for example, was doing just what you were talking about. They were allowing 3 months of deferral, but then in the fourth month, you had to pay all 4 months. That wasn't probably particularly helpful to most folks, and Bank of America has made some adjustments on that. They're now, upon request and upon review of your situation, considering the 3-month deferral, and that's what you're seeing from most of our local banks. Truist, SunTrust, First Horizon, and it varies a little from bank to bank, but most all of those are offering up to a 3-month deferral. You're still paying interest, but you're not having to actually write a check. Those mortgage payments are being tacked on to the back side of your mortgage. And I would absolutely, the first thing I would say on the mortgage deferral is do not do it if you're able to pay your mortgage. Because as you said, none of these are things that are going to eliminate the debt or wipe out the mortgage payment itself. So if you're in a financial position, be it because you're still employed or you've been able to receive unemployment benefits that are sufficient, if you're able to pay that mortgage, probably best to go ahead and do that now. But if you're in a situation where you fear that you can't, then certainly contact your mortgage provider and work with them to see about that deferral, which could be anywhere from 3 to even 12 months if it's a federally insured mortgage.
Okay. Jeff, brother, do you have any specific information on Eastman Credit Union? I know a lot of folks, us being located in Mount Carmel and Churchill area, there's a lot of connection to Kingsport, and we have a lot of folks that work at Eastman and bank with ECU. Do you know specifically if is it deferred only for 3 months and then all due in the third, or do you know?
Eastman Credit Union's got several different programs that they're using for folks that have loans with them. If you have a credit card, if you have an ECU credit card, for example, they are deferring any late fees, interest charges, or anything for 2 months, allowing you to defer your payment for a couple of months if that's something that you need to do. If you have auto loans, car loans, things of that sort, very similarly they're allowing you upon request to defer a couple of months worth of those. Those would be tacked on to the end. If you skip your next two car payments, they get tacked onto the end, but you're not having to pay any penalties. There's no adverse reporting on your credit. Their mortgages, they're handling on a case-by-case basis. They would request that you contact their mortgage service department. I do know in talking to a couple of folks that they have been able to, at least in some situations, provide the deferral of payment, and the deferral being tacking the payments onto the end, as opposed to just making all 4 due in the 4th month. So, but ECU's doing a great job of working with folks, so I'd encourage them to reach out to them.
Okay. And I definitely hear y'all saying contact your bank personally and ensure that you hear from them, verification on these things. Very good. Anything else y'all wanted to add in the frame of that kind of larger question? I know we kind of hit many of those sub questions to that: small business, unemployment, mortgage deferment, retired individuals. Anything to add?
Let me mention just a couple of things on retired individuals and also around retirement funds. Those individuals that are over 70 and a half as of 2019, if they have IRAs, they are generally required every year to take money out of those IRAs, what's called a required minimum distribution, so that the IRS can get their taxes on those funds. The part of the CARES Act did suspend that requirement this year. So you're not going to be forced to take any money out of your IRA. And if you're somebody that's blessed to be in a financial situation that you don't have to have those funds, that's very likely a wise option to consider. With the markets down and perhaps your IRA balance is a little lower, it may be a blessing to not have to do that. Although it's not a new thing, it certainly applies here too. The IRS, in a rare sense of generosity, does have a provision called qualified charitable distributions. In English, Patrick always wants me to go back to English here.
Yes,
that
please,
allows
please
someone who's over 70 and a half and has an IRA to make charitable gifts directly from that IRA to their church, to another charity or something of that sort. And the really great thing about that is it allows them to reduce their income because it doesn't ever show up on their tax return as a taxable income without mattering whether they're itemizing or taking a standard deduction. With tax reform, most of our folks now are taking a standard deduction and maybe not getting tax benefit of their charitable gifting. If you're someone who's over 70 and a half with an IRA, you really need to talk to your IRA holder, whoever that may be, to talk about maybe setting up a standard gift to your church every month. Patrick would suggest a very large amount would be good.
Absolutely. Well, why not?
But it's a great way, even if you've got a small IRA. I mean, if you're talking a $20,000-$30,000 IRA, if you're gifting a couple of $1,000s to church each year, it's almost in any situation going to be better for you to make that gift straight from the IRA for tax purposes. The other thing around retirement funds that I wanted to mention that was part of the CARES Act, for individuals that are below 59 and a half, there's a lot of restrictions generally about taking money out of IRAs, taking money out of your 401ks, things of that sort. And I would start by saying I don't recommend this unless you need it. But if you have to have it, they did put a provision in there to allow you to take up to $100,000 out of your IRAs or your employer retirement plans, 401ks, without any penalty in 2020. You still pay tax, but you're allowed to do it, which is one big thing, and there's no 10% penalty. Also allows you to pay some of that back, all of it back over the next 3 years if you so wanted, and you can also spread the tax over 3 years. So if you got in a extremely difficult financial situation and needed, say, $25,000 and you had no other source other than your 401k, it may be that the best thing there would be an option to take that 401k withdrawal this year, and you could be able to pay the tax on it, 1/3 of it in 2020, 1/3 of it in 2021, and 1/3 in 2022. So it may be providing access to funds for people that wouldn't normally be able to pull money out of 401ks or IRAs for younger folks. So again, kind of a last resort thing, but if it's necessary, it's a big benefit.
Certainly.
Patrick, one other thing on that QCD, the qualified charitable deduction, they by taking that too, if you have to take it as your part of your required minimum distribution, it could push you into a higher tax bracket, which would affect some of your Social Security benefits. And Jeff probably could speak to that too, but it affects the amount on your medical requirement that the Social Security allows. So by taking it out of your qualified or your required minimum distribution, you're not taxed on that, and which will not push you into a higher tax bracket.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great chance. It may very well be that paying your church, your commitment to church or what you want to give to church straight from your IRA not only saves you in taxes, but it may save you in your Medicare premium, how much of your Social Security is taxed. So it's often at least a win, but sometimes a win-win-win. So certainly encourage folks to look at that.
Okay.
Great program.
Good deal.
Yep.
Well, last question, gentlemen. If we should find ourselves in another pandemic, what are some action steps that we should take immediately? Do we need a financial crisis plan? outside of the saving that we're already doing and the steps that we're already taking to kind of protect ourselves, should we have already written up a kind of financial crisis plan, or are there any steps that, week 1, week 2, as we see something like this setting in the future, if it happens again, that we should take immediately?
I would say that the first part of that is just what you alluded to, is not having a financial crisis plan, but a financial plan. I suspect strongly your plan, although it may not have a specific crisis section, it's going to include things such as emergency savings for situations. It's going to include retirement planning, things of that sort. And if you've got that in place and you've been blessed to be able to work hard enough to get some of that money put back, the crisis is often, in most situations, going to fall inside of that. Okay. I would say that step one, anytime that something like this would occur, is going to be a quick assessment of your situation. What do I have in my savings account? What do I have available to me as funds? And then if you have a financial planner, kind of touching base with them to see, or if not, just kind of going through your bank accounts, taking a look and see what's there. And absolutely, you need, in a situation like this, and I hate to say watch the news, but it is somewhat watch the news to find out what things may be available. There may be some small businesses that end up missing out on the Paycheck Protection Plan because they did not become aware of it until the funds ran a little further along. But from my perspective, just having a basic financial plan with that savings and things in place is oftentimes going to take care of most of the situations when a crisis occurs. But Bill, what sort of thoughts might you have on that?
Yeah, it's the whole thing going back, and it's like I said, the people that are struggling now, it's tough for them. But going forward, for them and anyone else starting out or whatever, is to have to set up your objectives and your goals. What are you looking for? What I want to be in 20 years? I want to retire in 20 years. Well, if you have zero savings, no 401k, retiring in 20 years is probably not going to happen. So, planning for it's not really a crisis. There's always a financial crisis. A car, you wreck a car and you get about half what it's worth, and that type of thing. It's a financial crisis. Roof blows off your house and you don't have insurance, whatever. So just setting your objectives and goals up would go ahead and set things up like Jeff was saying. You'd set up these funds and this, if you get again, old ox in a ditch. No one has an ox anymore, but when your car gets in a ditch, then you have situations to fall back on. Because you set up these objectives and goals from the beginning. So going forward, that's what you need to do. Okay, now this crisis is here. We're going to play out. What do I do when I come out of here? What changes do I need to make? And then set that up for that. And that will set you up for that. Last thing that I'm going to say is that we need to go back and refer to what Paul said in Philippians, that he is content in whatever circumstances he's in. And we need to really remember that. We have a gift of eternal life. And that's most important. That's most important.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Amen.
Amen, brother. You did all that good work in making yourself so current and modern with the Air Jordans reference, and then you ruined it all with ox in a ditch. You just jumped right back into it with ox in a ditch.
Well, and I go back. That old school goes back to my grandparents and my parents that they went through all this stuff years ago with the Depression and all that. So some of us old folks have been schooled in that you really have to pay attention to little things, and so
absolutely,
it's and this will maybe help people realize that things like this can happen. It's just not. It's not.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that happened back. That'll never happen again.
Mm-hmm.
Things can happen, and you need to be prepared. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad here at the end you did bring up just the hope of the gospel and the hope that we have in Scripture that we regardless of our income level or regardless of our employment status, because of the good work that we do for Christ, because of the work that He's done in us, we can lay up treasure in a place where moth and fire cannot destroy.
Right.
And what hope and what security that is. So, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough. Anything, just before I close this in prayer, is there anything else you just wanted to add that you didn't get to touch on, or anything that you wanted to nuance, or any final exhortation for us?
Patrick, I might just real briefly touch on available help for individuals. I know
Yes,
we
sir.
talked a little bit. We talked a little bit about help that might be available for individuals right now. Unemployment is certainly a big part of that, and just to point out a couple of things that are different with the unemployment. Part of the CARES Act did provide unemployment benefits to many people who are traditionally excluded from unemployment, particularly the self-employed. Unemployment has normally been reserved for people that worked for companies, governments, businesses that paid for unemployment insurance, and a self-employed person was completely on their own. But recognition of the impact of this, Congress allowed states, and all states are providing unemployment benefits to those folks that are self-employed, or what we would call gig employees. So those folks need to be aware, if they're suffering an economic downturn, that they need to go through their state unemployment office. It's an online process that it can be done. It's going to be very confusing, because the first thing they're going to get is a letter that says they're not eligible because they don't have any wages posted, because all of their income is self-employment. But both those and folks that are eligible for unemployment normally are eligible for not only the traditional Tennessee unemployment, which caps out at $275 a week, but the pandemic unemployment assistance through the federal government is an extra $600 a week. Now, that is scheduled to terminate July 31st, the pandemic part. But what that means is an individual who's suffering from loss of employment that might have, been making $500 a week, they're going to likely find that their unemployment benefits are now more like about $850. So they may actually have a little bit more income than they would normally. I just encourage them to make sure they recognize that's temporary, and to try to make good use of that, to hold on to some of the extra if they have some, in case the unemployment runs out. But unemployment can be a huge benefit there. The one other thing for individuals that's really not gotten a lot of play in the news media, and it's somewhat limited applicability, but for folks that may be somewhat income and asset challenged, and when I say assets, if they've got less than a couple of $1,000s in the bank, and if they're a two-person household that's making less than a couple of $1,000s a month, there's actually a program through the Tennessee Department of Human Services to provide some emergency cash grants. That married couple that I mentioned that's trying to live on maybe $1,800, $2,000 a month, they may be able to get emergency grants for 2 months of $1,000 a month. That can be particular. This is a group of folks that oftentimes weren't working and maybe aren't eligible for any sort of unemployment or anything, and they're just being impacted economically beyond even some of the traditional ways. But to file application for that, it's through the Tennessee Department of Human Services. And if you were to access that via the internet or call your local Tennessee Department of Human Services and to ask about the emergency COVID-19 grants, they can provide more information about the income limits. And again, you have to have a fairly small bank account, but those folks that may be in that situation, that $1,000 a month could be super critical to them for these next couple of months. So just want to make sure people know that's out there as well.
For sure. Absolutely. Mr. Bill, anything to add?
No, we're good. I think you've done a good job. Good moderator.
Oh, I just floundered. You guys brought the expertise, and I want to thank both of you so much for being willing to serve us in this, and you've done a fantastic job. I've learned a ton. I've been just sitting here taking notes as we've been talking through some of the stuff, and I know a lot of the things that y'all shared are just really on the minds of a lot of folks, and particularly a lot of our people. So really appreciate you both taking the time to be with us. If I could, I'll close this in prayer, and then we can sign off. Well, so appropriate to end our conversation with just the rejoinder of the hope that we have in the gospel. Lord, that we are a part of your kingdom, which is an eternal kingdom, a kingdom that cannot be assailed by even pandemics or crises or recessions or all the things that we battle through in our time here. That doesn't make the impact of any of those things any less. It doesn't make us feel the impacts any less, but it gives us a certainty of hope in future glory and in what you are using these things to bring about in us, whether that be sanctification or any number of things. So, Lord, we trust as your followers, we trust you, and we trust your goodness. We trust what we know about you, and we hold fast to that during these times. So, Lord, we thank you for the hope that we have in the gospel. Lord, thank you for Mr. Bill and Mr. Jeff and their willingness to sacrifice time here during their weekend to be a part of this conversation and just to freely offer their advice and their wisdom that they've gained through years of serving you well in their vocation. That happens to be that happens to apply to just the things that we spoke of. And Lord, I'm certainly humbled by their service to your church there in Johnson City. That both of these men are churchmen and have continued to serve and lead well in those endeavors, and likewise in their personal relationships and in their personal integrity. So Lord, thank you for them, and thank you for the time that we've had as we've had this conversation, Lord, and just how helpful it was. We give you all the praise and the glory and the honor for it, and we have gathered and we have prayed in Christ's name. Amen.